green isn't a destination. It's a process. You spend 10 years looking at wastewater, not sewage, industrial wastewater, and your eyes get opened up to a lot of things that are really not good for anybody. And industry uses up to half of all fresh water supplies on the planet, depending on where you are. We solved the problem other people couldn't. Companies, enormous companies, international companies you've heard of, couldn't solve this plant's problem. And we came in and we were able to solve it because we weren't selling boxes.
Welcome to the So Good to Grow Good podcast, the show where we explore how changemakers and innovators are building sustainable systems for a better future. I'm your host, John Kane Gonzalez, an entrepreneur fascinated by how mission-driven leaders turn ideas into real, scalable impact. Today's guest is John Grizz Deal, founder and CEO of X-Water, a company that's commercializing breakthrough technology from national labs to solve the world's most critical challenges, industrial water stress. Grizz has spent decades turning scientific innovation into commercial products, and X-Water is his 9th startup. The company transforms industrial wastewater into clean, reusable water at a fraction of the cost, helping industries reduce their water footprint while saving millions of dollars in the process. In our conversation, Grizz shares how he commercializes government lab technology, the challenges of scaling a deep tech startup, and why he believes people will only adopt green solutions when there's money in it. Let's dive in. Well, welcome to the show, Grizz. I'm so excited to have you here. You have some amazing stories to tell and an even more amazing solution that you've built. How about you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm one of 4 kids, Air Force brats. We grew up overseas and, was in high school during the so-called Reagan Revolution. So after that, had no idea what I was going to do with my life and ended up just going to college until they kicked me out.
Okay. Why did they kick you out?
Well, because after you get so many degrees, they just stop. They're like, you should leave now. You've got too many degrees. No, I kid. I went to school for economics and geography and have spent my entire life as an environmentalist and somebody trying to make the world a little bit better. Our family grew up, we're very politically active in that, we feel like that government is a place where society comes together, can build something for everybody. And so that's extended through my career and all the various startups I've done. Lived all over the world. Been in a bunch of different positions, was a VC for a while, have been an investment banker, CEO and startup CEO of 9 startups. And I know it doesn't show, but I'm 40 years old. No, I'm just kidding. This is an entrepreneur at 40. No, it is an entrepreneur at 60 years old, and I've still got 2 or 3 startups left in me.
Wow. So after X-Water, you're going to continue on. That's amazing.
Oh, sure. I mean, look, this idea of continually improving the canvas, this planet that we live on, is full of great challenges and opportunities to make a positive impact. And it's also full of great opportunities to make a ton of money, because anytime there's change, there's money available for that change. If you kind of look back at the first wave of the Industrial Revolution, the robber barons, and the second wave, now as humans, we've done a lot to our planet to improve it for humans. And we want to continue that progress so that, humanity can live for hopefully thousands of years on this small little blue ball sitting out in space.
I mean, you brought up an interesting point there, both impact and money. Why is that an important thing to highlight, like for yourself personally?
Well, I think, first of all, getting people to change is difficult. Let's go back to before you were born. People used to just throw bottles away. Then people decided to implement, well, maybe if we give them a penny or 2 pennies to bring back their bottle, then we can recycle the bottle. In that case, they meant clean it out and reuse it, not melt it down and make new glass. And then, over time, the damage to the environment when I was growing up was pretty severe. We had things like acid rain. We had a hole in the ozone. We had smog emissions and power plants, coal plants, throwing crap into the atmosphere. And as a society, we came together and said a couple things. First of all, we'd like to have a nicer environment, something that we can sustain humanity with over time. But the way you get people to implement change is incenting them. There's got to be some incentive. And the universal incentive that I point to is money, either saving it or making it. And so in our work, over the last 35 years, everything we've done has a great sort of technological leap, and it's cool and it's better and it's faster, but it's got to either make people money or save people money so that you can help get over that resistance to change. It's really easy to keep
Hmm.
doing the same thing over and over. It's really tough to get people to maybe segregate their aluminum cans from the rest of their trash. That took a whole
Hmm.
generation to figure out how to do that. And now people do it,
Hmm.
without even really thinking about it. But there was that incentive to do it there. There's social pressure, but there was also, for a long time, I mean, even as a kid, we used to go collect aluminum cans and turn them in to make money.
Hmm.
Now it's done at sort of the city or the county level, but that incentive was provided for us to get us to change our behavior.
Hmm. That's a very important point. Incentives. They say, "Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the behavior."
Right. That's exactly
Uh,
right. And economics is all about, risk, reward, incentives. And especially when it comes to dealing with things in the sort of environmental specter, it's really
mm,
hard as a uh, spectrum. It's really hard as an individual to feel like you can have any positive impact. So one of the things that we've done with X Water is open up our company basically to the community. It's not likely that my neighbor down the street is going to buy one of our $1 million industrial wastewater treatment machines, but she can feel good about supporting us in lots of different ways throughout the community. Lobbying businesses and the politicians to do better with water, to put regulations in to do better with water, or invest in
mhm,
our company. And all that stuff gives people a sense that they're involved and that they're doing something
mm,
positive for change that's good for everybody.
mhm. Like, when you say, open it up to the community, you mentioned a few things there, but is there more involvement, more participation in actually working in the company, or is it more about the, um, sharing the awareness and raising the awareness?
A lot of it's awareness sharing.
Mhm,
We do a lot of stuff in the community that has nothing to do with water, just because we feel like, as a company, we commit 10 to 50% of our paid time to nonprofit or volunteer work in a lot of different areas, business development, environmental things, even registering voters. We feel like that, unlike a lot of large companies, as a small business, we can set aside some aspect of our business working lives to do something for no personal profit to that
mm,
because the profit comes from society as a whole and your contribution to it.
right,
So we feel the same way about our company. We want people to, even again, if they've never been to a power plant or they've never been to a landfill and really don't care about that, we educate them on different aspects of water that does affect their lives at home or at the national level with policy decisions or regulations. And so people inherently want to feel good about what they do with their lives. And it's really easy sometimes to think that there's a few people in control of the planet and the rest of us are just sort of have to take it. But our
mm,
philosophy is that you get a bunch of people doing little small actions just like recycling aluminum cans over time, then you have a huge impact.
right. It sounds like there's a lot, a lot of backstory. Like, what catalyzed your journey, and what is your connection to clean tech and water? How did that come to be?
Well, my sister Deborah has been my partner for a couple decades now. Before I was kind of working on my own in IT and software, and we joined up because we're far enough apart age-wise to have not really grown up together. And so she brought to the table this incredible ability to explain to the public, what we're doing and to help us frame, our mission in a way that not only drives revenue, but also, drives what we refer to as the social mission side of our businesses. And
Mhm,
she, it was 20 years ago, she came to me and said, water's an issue. It's the next oil. We need to get involved and do something about it. And so our first foray into that was supporting an effort by some scientists from Los Alamos National Lab to get a small modular nuclear reactor licensed and put on the marketplace. And we worked for several years on that. And we were the first people to ever go to the NRC and say, hey, we have an SMR here. We'd like to get that licensed. Our capital support fell apart after Fukushima, but we still wanted to
mm,
do something in water. So we went back to Los Alamos, met with some folks who had spent decades really working on alternative ways to treat really difficult to deal with wastewater streams. We're not talking about municipal sewage. We're talking about oil and gas mixed in with water, or, heavy arsenic or heavy metals, things like that. And they'd figured out a way to, for a much lower cost, separate out the contaminants and concentrate them so that you could now take water coming out of a refinery and treat it for less money than it would cost to haul it off and dump it somewhere or burn it. And that water can be used for ag, or it can be used back at the plant. So that ability to recycle water for 50, 60, 70, 90%, sometimes 90% less than the cost of throwing it away, that's pretty revolutionary. And so we encountered on this journey, and over the last 10 years have spent virtually every waking minute focused on not only learning about our own technology that we licensed and how it can be applied in different ways, but also engineering solutions that work out of the field. Because ultimately, there's a lot of tech that never sees a light of day because people can't figure out how to package it up and, price it and get it into the hands of somebody that actually wants to use it. That's a huge struggle right there. And then the second struggle came proving to people that we could do what we said we would do. Because water treatment's kind of conventional. It's been around for a long time. Even some of the techniques that we use, it's not a fast technologically advancing field, in water treatment. And so our biggest struggle has been that we have this incredible solution, meaning it's not credible to people in the water industry. And so we have to prove to them that, yes, we can do, in fact, what we said we were going to do it at the price point, and our machines are engineered well, and they can work in the field and go on for years and years.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it is, while you said it's not technologically advanced, you're referring to the industry, the technology that you're doing is pretty technologically advanced.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the advances in nano coating, the ability to really analyze things at the molecular level, that's all our generation. That's all in the last 20 years. It was virtually impossible to even do some chemical analysis to the levels, especially on these so-called forever chemicals. That's become a big issue. The treating of water at the molecular level is pretty new.
Right.
It used to be done sort of as a compound level, like, a class of things, like bacteria.
It's going over my head a lot, and I wonder, how do you sort of explain the value or what your solution actually is to more of the everyday person, so they understand the benefit?
Well, we try to make an analogy. Like, here's one. The pure water filter that you have in your kitchen, you have to replace that like every 6 months. And they say to replace it every 6 months because it's based on the average household use, in North America and blah, 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 all the sort of demographics around that. Well, imagine if you could buy a pure water filter and use it for 500 years.
Right. Wow.
Now, the cost savings is substantial. Instead of, every 6 months, you're replacing it every 500 years. And the way you get to that replace every 500 years, or whatever analogy you want to use, is by concentrating the contaminants that filter captures and then purging them. So we're not destroying matter here, right? But what we're not doing is, sort of continually running through, additional media over time, filtration media. Another analogy would be, cleaning up an oil spill with an absorbent media or a bunch of paper towels, which is going to use more material, which is going to create the greater volume of waste, which is going to cost more. The paper towels. So it's that same kind of thing that we're doing. And it's because of the advancements that were made at, New Mexico Tech and Los Alamos and University of Texas in reusable filtration media that's targeted to certain classes of contaminants. That's where our real innovation is. All the engineering around it, and how to push water through it, and how to, get maximum contact time and flow rate and reduce turbulence. I mean, all that stuff is sort of engineering. With enough time and duct tape, you'll figure that out. But the real scientific innovation was coming up with this idea of saying we can make special purpose media that attracts certain kinds of contaminants, and let's make it reusable.
Right.
That's revolutionary.
Gotcha. It has like similarities to how SpaceX and their reusable rockets, in that sense, where maybe that's a loose analogy, but what it came from this is more like wash, rinse, and repeat rather than just throw away.
Exactly. It is much easier from a technical standpoint to use a filtration method or media once than it is to come up with, all the science behind how to reuse this stuff over and over and still get good performance. That's the other thing. The filtration media that's inside your pure water filter is most likely granular activated carbon, which is essentially ground up, charcoalized coconut shells. Well, because of the way that media works, once you fill all the pore spaces in it with contaminants coming through your water, it's really difficult to get those contaminants off that media again.
Right.
And
Right.
in fact, it's so difficult that it costs more to reuse it than it does to just throw it away. Well, throw it
Mm-hmm.
away means a landfill, or I guess you could
Mm-hmm.
burn it, but you've got emissions, carbon emissions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with with our technology, we can wash or purge the contaminants off the media, and that
Mm-hmm.
concentrates the contaminants. So, one good factoid here is that you could take 200,000 gallons of water, run it. So that's your waste product, right? You're a guy working at a factory, and he's got
Mm-hmm.
200,000 gallons of water. Paying to have that hauled off at $5 a piece is $5 a gallon. It's a pretty expensive proposition. Or
Mm-hmm.
building some big plant out back that takes weeks or months for all the contaminants to sort of drop out and into a pond that someday you've got to clean out. That takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of real estate. But with our tech, instead what you do is run water through our machine, and we're going to grab those contaminants in real time. Now the contaminants are on the media. Okay. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to purge the contaminants, not the media, but just the contaminants. And then that concentration accounts to about 200,000 to 1. So instead of having a 200,000 gallon problem, you don't have a 1 gallon problem. Well, you
Mm-hmm.
still got to pay to get rid of that, but now it's $5, not $1,000,000.
Right.
That is a huge advancement, and it's difficult for people to get their head around.
Yeah, that's a huge shift in how even just understanding how water treatment is done. That is just a huge savings in general. There's a question there around like in your solution, where do you normally place it? Is it at the water treatment facilities? Is it somewhere else?
Well, our goal is to have one of our machines sitting in the corner of every mine, every factory, every refinery on the planet. Right? It's just
Hmm.
it's sort of like a water fountain, but in this case, it's treating water, and it just kind of chugs away all day as they make wastewater. They have water coming off of, say, a line in a steel factory. They use water to cool off steel. Well, it gets contaminated with everything that's on the steel, carbon and metals and things, and they have to do something with that water. So you put it in a trench, run it through a pipe, run it through one of our machines, and now you've got water that you can use. So you create a closed water loop at the factory, at the facility.
Right.
That overall cuts down your water bill to bring new water in too.
Right. So so after the filtration cleaning does, what happens to the waste? Where does that go?
Well, it goes the same place that all the water's been going before. There are specialized handlers, people that come and take away that waste, or you can deal with it on site. But again, we're not destroying matter. You're still going to have waste, but it's going to be highly concentrated. So the overall cost of
Right.
getting rid of it is going to be dramatically less. Um,
Right.
People actually burn water. I know it sounds ridiculous, but they'll use a furnace.
Right.
Create a steam column. Steam goes out into the air. The contaminants drop out in the bottom, and they've got the contaminants concentrated. That's really expensive.
Yeah. Right.
Think about boiling water, right? The energy required to boil water is really expensive, and turn it into steam at a temperature that will drop out all the contaminants so you're not spewing them into the air. That's a whole nother piece of this. So our cold process of just running through this specialized media that, again, it was designed to attract these certain classes. So we have a different media for metals, a different media for, say, hydrocarbons, a different media for sulfur compounds, and all that's segmented out based on the sort of the molecular behavior of those compounds.
To kind of put it into like maybe a bit of not a box, but just to distill it down, funnily enough, where it comes through, to distill it down, the alternatives that we have or the current solutions that we have are one, wasteful, uh expensive, and what other key differentiators would you say
Well, you
that
lose the
fix?
water, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, in general, unless you're recycling that water through a more conventional plant, again, that takes a lot of time, money, and land to do that. You're losing that water. And, think about Colorado. We are always water stressed. Every drop counts. Um, we're constantly having regional droughts, even sort of at the community level. And so
Hmm.
helping industry lessen their load, and industry uses up to half of all fresh water supplies on the planet, depending on where you are. Half. That's before ag. So,
Hmm.
and then ag takes most of that. And then, what's left for humans and is, a very, very small amount. So, so we're teaching the industry how to be better stewards of their resources. And at the same time, they're spending less money. So, hey, that's the way you get somebody to change, right? You help them save a ton of money. Then there's more water left for the community or just to recharge the water table for next year when you have a drought.
Right, right. Gotcha. And so when you talk about industry, how would you describe like who is the typical buyer of your solution and how do you communicate the
It,
value?
it
I mean, you've said it in so many ways, but I'm curious what you would say here.
Right. It depends on the industry and the specific plant. It's very difficult to find somebody. Although one of our customers, a mining company, has somebody that's the water guy. Great. Once we found out they had a water guy, we go to him and we say, "Here, we've got a slightly better solution for you, or dramatically better solution, and you should implement this in these kinds of mining operations." And then so you go through the whole purchasing process, improving the viability of the technology, maybe a pilot or something. That's how you win long-term, sustainable, repeatable customers. There are other customers that, maybe there's an emergency. And so we're building out a fleet of our own machines that go over road for after natural disasters. How many times have you heard of, something spills onto a highway or something spills,
Hmm.
off of a train track? If it touches water, then we can be there to help them. We don't do soil reclamation. So it's not a business that we're familiar with. There are great people that do soil reclamation. But what we do is we can reclaim that water, concentrate the waste, so you've got less of a big ass problem, to deal with. So in manufacturing, water is used constantly, and there's somebody there that's dealing with the regulatory environment. So maybe at this auto plant, it's a regulation attorney that's going to be our customer. Whereas over here at this auto plant, they're using so much water in this process, they actually have a guy that's responsible for natural resource, conservation allocation. So the titles will change, but basically it's anybody that cares about what's coming out of the plant that's not usable, solid or liquid. And, we've also worked on projects where what we want to do is separate the solid from the liquid. Uh, coal ash ponds come to mind. We don't have an installation there yet, but that's like something we can obviously do. There are hundreds of coal ash ponds around the U.S. that are basically, ashes and water mixed together. The ash could be a useful product depending on, everything's regional. What do you need? What could you do with that carbon locally? But the water itself, the problem is it flows really easy. And so,
Hmm.
coal ash ponds been known to break open. And now you've got a
Mm.
flood of some of the worst water, hydrocarbons, benzene, all these really complicated organic chemicals that can kill people. So, we're trying to get ahead of the problem, trying to get industry to sort of change for the better. And we've always done that. Green isn't a destination, it's a process.
Right.
Clean is
I
not
love
a
that.
destination, it's a process.
Right.
So over time, as humans, we've gotten better at being cleaner. I mean, you can think about, one of the greatest innovations in the world is the automobile in terms of clean tech. What? He said automobiles are great innovations for clean tech? Yes, compared to the problem they had. New York City, before the introduction of the automobile, had piles of horse manure 3, 4, 5 stories tall. People getting sick from the excrement and the wash off of that excrement, every street being dirty, being some kind of, cholera festival. So
Hmm.
getting rid of all that manure out of New York City saved the city, and they did it with a car. Okay,
Right.
car has its own issues in terms of impact on the environment, so let's do it slightly better. Maybe
Hmm.
it's an electric car. Hey, that sounds good. Maybe we do more mass transit. Maybe we put, jetpacks on everybody. I don't know, but over time we're going to figure out what that's going to be so that we can maintain our environment so it's livable and actually, people can live longer, live healthier, live less expensive lives over time.
Mm. There's always it reminds me, there's always a trade-off. I can't remember who said it, but there's no solutions, only trade-offs, and it sounds like, and, well, maybe X waters, there are no trade-offs. Would you?
Yeah, it's difficult for me to think what the trade-off is. Usually it's like, well, you can have it better or faster or cheaper, but you can't have, well, you can have 2 out of 3, right? With us, we've kind of nailed all 3. I guess it is somewhat about trade-offs. Nothing is ever perfect. And there's some basic constants. There's always waste generated in a conversion of energy to power.
Hmm.
That's just
Hmm.
always going to be the case.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes a huge amount of wasted, whether it's energy or byproducts coming off of that. Making stuff turns out to be dirty. Just think of all the packaging for the panel that comes to replace the panel on your car. There's more packaging than there is a metal panel or a plastic panel coming there, and that's got to be dealt with in a smart way. So,
Yeah.
less using things that aren't recyclable, like styrofoam, use more paper products, which are infinitely recyclable. That's a small step that can have a huge impact.
Right. Right. Well, it sounds like X water has many applications. It can be used in many different scenarios. Could you tell us about one of your flagship um, projects that you've done, a case study of some sort where
Yeah,
you've made a
here's
huge
this
impact?
is a real easy one. So there's a company that we're working with that spends about $5 million a year on wastewater disposal. They literally have tanker trucks sitting there, and every day their wastewater from their manufacturing of various chemical compounds goes into these trucks, and then somebody comes with a new truck. They leave the empty truck there. They take the full truck back to a facility to deal with the water. And there's some minimal treatment, but concentration. A lot of it's dumped down a well. If you get
Hmm.
a well with 2 miles deep, you're pretty good. You're way beyond the water table. It's again, depending on the geology, that's a pretty safe way of dealing with that water. Let nature over thousands of years treat it. But it's costing them a ton of money just to move water. Moving water is the dumbest thing in the world. It costs, unless it's going to move itself through gravity, it costs a ton of money to move water. And it has such a low unit volume that it's not something you'd want to put in the back of an airplane. Put a thousand kilos of water in the back of an airplane. You'd rather have it sort of just be at the location, or maybe you can make it or you can recycle at that location. Well, in the case of this company, their chemical manufacturing is so varied that their wastewater changes constantly. And so
Hmm.
we had to design a system for them that would handle a whole different class of contaminants and chemicals that might change from week to week.
Hmm.
Bottom line, though, they can reuse their water now, and it's not costing them $5, $4, $3 a gallon to have that water hauled off and disposed of. It's costing them 25 cents a gallon, and they get the water back. Now they still got waste, and that waste still costs $3, $4, $5 a gallon, but it's a lot smaller amount of waste. It's about 1% of the original water waste because we concentrated it, and you don't have used media going out because the media is reusable. So, you stack all those sort of things together. That's how you end up with, yeah, this is better. It's definitely faster, and it's way cheaper.
Right. And so I'm hearing the different metrics that you use to kind of measure success or impact there, like the chief of which is the cost, reducing that.
We run on cost just because it's so dramatic with us, and because if you think about it, wastewater is always a cost center. It's not making anybody money, right?
Hmm.
It's a part of overhead. It's a problem. In
Hmm.
the oil and gas industry, 95% of their waste is water that comes up with oil and gas.
Hmm.
And that's a
But
huge cost to them.
hmm do you measure anything else, like in terms of the social impact? Is there other things that you're measuring as well in
Yeah,
that regard?
absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah,
don't want to say that we're just focused on cost, um, but that's how we get in the door. Then we can
I
help them
gotcha.
look at,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
how do we maximize your water purchasing power? Maybe you can save up water for a week and you buy waters on the weekends at night from the city when you can negotiate a lower cost because nobody's using the resource then. It gives you options when you're not just throwing away something that's perfectly good once you treat it. It would be like throwing away your bed sheets buying new ones every time you got them. It's going to cost a lot of money. You're going to build up a lot of waste. I mean, the social impact could be huge depending on where you are. This is where we talk about, solving regional drought, because regional drought
Hmm.
is a huge issue. I bet it's probably true in most of the planet that industry gets what it wants before people, because industry drives society through the economy.
Hmm.
So if you're somebody living in India, the people at the textile mills get first crack at water. I'm just talking about with, less infrastructure, but in general, they're going to get that first crack at the water. Unfortunately, we know for a fact that some of those, textile mills will then take contaminated water and dump it in the river, which is where people are trying to, get their water for their daily needs.
Hmm.
So, the sort of secondary, tertiary, quaternary effects of people getting sick, people not having access to clean water, people not having access to good sanitation, those all come from somebody hogging a resource. And that
Hmm. Hmm.
happens even in the U.S. I
Hmm.
mean, absolutely. One of our big tears is bottled water. There are towns in this country where their water source was sold to somebody like Nestle, and the locals don't have water anymore. That's just crazy. That's so
Hmm.
somebody can, have the convenience of not having to rinse out a bottle and use it more than once. So,
Hmm.
there, if you want to save society, get rid of bottled water. I mean, that's
Right.
that's definitely the way to go. Bottled water
Yeah.
costs more than Coca-Cola in some countries, in developing countries, and it deliberately costs more than Coca-Cola. And Coke is the company putting that water on the market. And they're
Wow.
charging more than they do for a soft drink because they want to get people hooked on the soft drink.
Uh-huh. You're dropping
So,
some hard facts here. This is really,
well,
really
yeah, I mean,
enlightening.
just you spend 10 years looking at wastewater, not sewage, wastewater, industrial wastewater, and your eyes get opened up to a lot of things that are kind of, not just shady, but really not good for anybody but maybe the person at the top who managed to sort of hoard that resource. Palm is another company. We love our Palm wonderful drinks, but they've pretty much, taken all the fresh water in the lower valley and put it under their control.
Right.
Um, that's bad.
Hmm.
Again, I wouldn't say anything against Palm, but the Fiji water people take water from Fiji, and locals don't have water now.
Right.
Because it's some commercial product.
Right.
So,
Right.
I try to focus on the positive aspects of what we're doing because,
Well, let's do that then. Let's
yeah.
go back to let's go back to the story, the main line here. So like thinking about the success story that you just shared with us, you know, why would you consider that to be one of the first things that's top of mind for you when you think about success of X Water? What makes that the win that you talk
Well, it's
about?
one of our first successful earlier installations, right? So that's
Mhm.
one reason. But also the fact that we solved the problem other people couldn't. Companies,
Mhm.
enormous companies, international companies you've heard of, couldn't solve this plant's problem. And we came in and we were able to solve it because we weren't selling boxes, right? We weren't taking,
Mhm.
oh, there's that product on the shelf. We're going to match it with that product on the shelf. We were coming in and trying to solve the problem at the plant and see if we had some kit, some equipment that would help them do that. Right? It's a different process. And by the way, it doesn't scale very well. We know that. In a few years, our company is going to be so big that we're going to have a special unit that just works, say, on, like a skunk works unit that works on heavy problems. We've got another customer who is having to take their arsenic level of water that runs near an old well they own. Okay, this is naturally occurring arsenic coming out of the ground, out of a spring. Now it's on top of the ground, and it's running adjacent to their well. They're not touching it, but that arsenic is getting concentrated in a pond downstream. So all of a
Mhm.
sudden, it becomes that company's responsibility to take the arsenic out of the water. This is what I call the EPA's, the EPA's philosophy is if you own it, you must have broken it. These guys had nothing to do with making that arsenic come out of the ground, but it goes through their property, so now it's their problem. And
Right.
they have to go down to a level that's much, much lower, an order of magnitude less than even drinking water standards for arsenic, because it's going to go sit in a pond or it's going to go sit in some marsh and build up over time. That's a difficult problem to solve. We haven't cracked it yet. We hope to crack
Mhm.
it. We're going
Mhm.
to have to do a ton of experiments in order to crack it. And we will spend more money than we'll make on that installation, obviously. But
Right.
now we've got a whole new engineered, version of an existing product that we can use in these extreme situations with arsenic. And they're all over the world. So,
Yeah. Right.
there's an immediate benefit to doing that kind of, it's not really even a loss leader, sort of just barely paying your expenses to solve somebody's problem. Uh,
Yeah.
that's our marketing. right? We don't do
Right.
advertising. We're not on the TV. I do some podcasts. We write articles, do social media. Our marketing is going out in the field. That's our marketing budget, rather, is going out in the field and solving problems that everybody else gave up on.
Well, tell me about that. So, like this flagship client, your first successful installation and use of the solution. How did you actually go about finding them, or did they find you? Was it a luck, or is it a system of some sort?
It's both. So one thing you should know that is anybody that moves stuff off their property has got some regulator behind it. I don't care if it's a truck taking toys out of a factory or water running off of your facility or being driven off your facility. You got to have a permit. So all those permits are listed with the state of Colorado and they're public. So it sounds insane, but we have these like endless cold email things that says, we can cut your wastewater cost by 50 to 90%. And then we start dialing phones. And one
Uh-huh.
bad thing about modern society is people don't answer their phone.
Right.
So
That's true.
we dial for dollars a lot, and that's where the
Uh-huh.
luck comes in. And the neat thing is, though, we know now the questions to ask. Do you have an issue with your wastewater? Is it costing too much? If you get some regulatory pressure, bam, now that is a qualified lead. And then it goes into a slightly different system so that we can figure out really the parameters behind it and if we want to try to pursue that. That's the reason, by the way, we're raising money right now on the Start Engine is we need to scale that operation from a couple guys to 6 or 7 guys and put over-the-road demo units out so we can actually go to a plant and say, here, give us your water. We'll test it. All right, we're going to run it through a machine, test it again. We think it'll cost this much per gallon, per cubic meter, per drachma to transform this water and recycle it for you. You want to buy? I mean, the proof is in the pudding. So this first part of taking science, engineering a product that works, it's repeatable, got a manufacturing supply chain behind it, you've got quality testing, you've got certification, you've got a business model that works. That's the hard part. That's how you take a company that nominally is worth $1 million worth of its intellectual property and turn it into a $100 million company that then somebody else can take to the next step of mass manufacturing. And that's what we're doing with X Water. When we need to build manufacturing in Malaysia, I'm out. I don't do that, right? I do product design and early business development and, the real creative entrepreneurial part up front. Have no desire to have hundreds of employees ever again in my life. I've been there, done that, don't want it anymore.
Right. So it's interesting because you're talking about scaling and also like how you actually go to market and get customers. And what I heard you say is there's a bit of a funding constraint because if you could just get more boots on the ground to go out there and talk about the product, then would you say, like, again, using the system of permits and looking at what's been publicly published, if you just had more people, that's probably how you'd go and get 20 more leads? Or
Exactly. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So it's the difference between a startup, which is still trying to figure out who they are, what their business model is, and if their product works and if people want it, right? That's a startup. And a scale up, which is where we're at. We've run all the risk out. We've got all the product stuff solved, supply chain stuff solved. We even understand our business model to the point where we know how little we can charge and how much we can charge. Now what we need to do is have more boots on the ground out there selling. That's it.
Right. Where, other than knowing that they publish these permits publicly, where would you often maybe find people online? Like what do you know where your customers are and where they normally, hang out, let's say?
Congregate. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at the number of LinkedIn and Reddit groups there are that deal with industrial wastewater or clean tech or waste or somebody knows somebody. One of the neat things, by the way, about our company is we've got 2,600 small investors, that we recruited off Start Engine. They're all advocates for what we're doing. Right. So they might run it to somebody that works at the local plant, or they work at an oil refinery, or they know of somebody, or they know of some political person, they know some regulator. And so that word of mouth army is really important to companies trying to scale their, initial startup into a going concern. We spend a lot of time on social media. I mean, we
Yeah.
have somebody who's 30 hours a week making videos. That's
Oh,
all he does.
wow. Wow. Full
Yeah.
time?
That's all he does.
Wow.
And he's great at it. And we talk about all kinds of different topics. If you go to any of the social media accounts that look up IX Water, sometimes it's IX Water Guys, you'll see the gamut of stuff. And 80% of it doesn't even touch what we're doing with industrial wastewater. It's about water in general because we want to be seen as a thought leader, right? We want to be seen as people that are smart and understand, the issues around water in general.
Right. And then that's kind of getting into the next topic. I was just curious, when talking about becoming a thought leader and also growing the business, like other than, the funding and the boots on the ground, like what other bottlenecks are you experiencing that's impacting your ability to grow and to scale?
The fact that we don't have a consistent trade policy is currently messing with us. And we don't,
Mhm.
source any of our materials from overseas. But it's just created this sort of international environment of doing business with America is now going to be difficult. So the political wins affect even small businesses like us. Or one of our pending customers delayed a product purchase for a year because they're trying to get their stock up.
Mm.
Okay, that's great, fine for you. But in the meantime, they spent more money paying fines than they would have if they just put in rented, leased, done the cap. Who cares, to
Mhm.
get that machine working for them. So,
Mhm.
the economic conditions in our economy actually prevent lots of progress, right? If you're running to the end of the quarter to maximize your profit, to jack up your stock price because your compensation is tied to it, you will never make the best decisions for society, for your company. You make
Mhm.
best decisions for stockholders only. And
Mhm.
I believe that companies should serve society, not just their stockholders. I know that goes against economic theory and all this other stuff, maximize value for the shareholder. I think if
Mhm.
we had more companies that were worried about maximizing value for society, they'll still make money, but they're not going to make
Mhm.
dumbass decisions because they've got a report due in a week.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. Let in thinking about, other social entrepreneurs or people looking to get into this kind of work that you're doing, just looking at your own experience, like, what has been, mm, like, the challenges that you've experienced to getting it from where it was, from ground zero to where it is now? What are some of those life lessons,
Well,
milestones along the line?
yeah, for the 9 companies we've had, we've looked at hundreds of pieces of tech, IP, patents, whatever. And I mean, I'm working with a company today on something they're doing in software just because I find it interesting. It's a nice break for an hour from the water business. Um, First of all, is finding out if there's something out there that's interesting to you. Now, this is 360 or 180 from the way you do it, right? The way you usually do this is say, I identify a problem in the marketplace. I'm going to go find a solution and see if I can fix it and make money off it. When you're commercializing tech, especially from the national governments or universities, you go look at the smorgasbord of cool things and you go, is that anything? Is that going to solve a problem somewhere? I mean, it was designed for a reason. And in the case of our tech, it was specifically designed to do this. So it was easier. But we've evaluated technology. We're like, okay, well, this was built for the nuclear weapons complex, but it's got a real chance in mining. And then you have to figure out, does it actually work? Because scientists are great at making stuff work in the lab, not so great at making stuff work for 5 years without some fixing going on. So the difference between a scientific advancement and an engineered product is a huge chasm. And that usually either takes time or money and smart people. In our case,
Mhm.
we usually use time. Our previous companies were all VC funded. We decided not to do that this time because we didn't know how long it was going to take to go from technology to product. And if you can't tell a VC that now, if you're not even selling, you're probably not going to get a VC's attention. But there was a big amount of time between here's the technology, proving it works. Here's an engineered solution that people will not only accept, but want. And then now we've got a business model and can we manufacture it? That took 10 years. And in the water business, that's considered zippy. Water innovations take usually twice that long, even a simple valve. And it's because water is everywhere. So, there's these different aspects, these different steps. And in order to do entrepreneurial work, tech development at this level, you've got to really understand how to find people and how to collaborate with people that are subject matter experts, because I'm not. I'm the generalist, right? I'm the guy that sees this thing and goes, that could fit there. Let's go see if it would. And we do research. Is the market looking for something? Is there room for another solution? Can we build it at a price point that's going to make sense? Will it be enough bang for the buck? Is it 10x better than the last thing? Because our philosophy has always been, if new tech isn't 10 times better, forget it. Nobody will change. Right. I
Right.
mean, Microsoft is the prime example of that. They come out after all the innovators and they're like, oh, look, it's a little bit better, but it's got the Microsoft logo, and it fails. I mean, pick
Yeah.
your product. So to make that big technological leap, you've got to offer some real honest value, because it is so much easier to keep making money, to keep doing your operations the way you've done it. There's zero risk in that. So that also tells you something about the first customers. Those first customers usually are desperate. And and those are not mainstream customers. You'll sell a unit, solve a problem, and you'll kind of build your credibility on that. But then you're done with those guys. Those early adopters are not continuing revenue. They just never turn out to
Right.
be that.
Well, it definitely sounds like you're on that, that was called the diffusion of innovation, that, early adopter side. And I totally, agree with what you're saying, especially when working on social enterprises that are solving real hard problems. Like what I find, at least in this regard, is it's a changing of values and beliefs. I don't know if you would agree with that, or an understanding of the problem and how it impacts you.
Sure.
There appears to be some sort of like gap in awareness or an educational piece that's missing. You said it took you 10 years to get from where you were to where you are now, to prove that the technology can be a product. Now getting the product to, scale, what would you say is the way to shorten that gap? Because you don't need the money, you said, it's just the time. So how would you shorten the time?
Well, that time of discovery was because we didn't have excess money. But the problem is, to get big money means essentially private equity, a rich uncle, which we didn't have, or venture capitalist. And I'll be happy to come back and talk to you about venture capital and how it's evolved over the last 40 years of my business career, but it ain't the same. And it is full of expectations that are not realistic. Let me put it to you this way. So I go to VC and he's got to look at me and go, this guy's got to hit it out of the park. He's got to have the potential of being somebody that can make up for 9 of my mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Because 1 out of 10, or whatever the number is, 2 out of 10 of these
The
days,
unicorn situation, yeah.
not even unicorns. Unicorns are like big success. I'm just talking about paying them back something, doubling their money or whatever. Not billions, just give me my money back with some reasonable, outrageous, interest. So we understand those things. Will people buy it? That's where you're going to have the discussion, in the marketplace with the VC. But in the case of technology commercialization, we start with a patent and maybe a pilot. And that's all we had. And the other thing that worked against us is we came out at a time that people were not just putting money, into new ventures like this. It's tough to get stuff off the ground. The guys I'm working with now are literally working for free, working at fast food at night. Like, that is my best suggestion. Don't quit your day job. And if it takes you twice as long, 3 times as long, that's great, because at least you've got a product, a minimum viable product, or a first sale, or a customer interested, something that will attract investors. But say, here's my plan, and here's the proven tech, but not the proven product, and give me a bunch of money and not take most of the company from me. That's gone. That went away in the night.
Right. So, like, just thinking about this, like, in scaling or accelerating X's impact and its mission, like, what is that one constraint? If you could wave a magic wand, what would be that one constraint that you would remove that would just totally change things for you, and even for other companies that are trying to do something similar to you, that are trying to make this change, this impact in the world?
It's difficult to say one thing, except right now I'm so focused on raising capital. Capital would make a huge difference.
Some more
Right.
capital.
I've got a dozen customers waiting for an on-site demo at their facility for a day, a week, or a month. I need new capital to build those machines. They cost money. Not trivial, a couple $100,000 for just a, drag it on a trailer kind of machine. So that's why we're raising money. But the difference is we just raised money when we needed it. So that helped us in terms of valuation. We've got a nice valuation. Our early investors have made 10, 15x, 20x off their
Wow.
original investment. But constantly raising money has put a huge strain on the business too,
Yeah.
because if you don't have the capital in order to hire a full-time engineer, then you use some engineering advice, and all of a sudden the CEO is the chief engineer, and also the guy raising money and doing podcasts. I mean, but you've got to be willing to do that. I mean, that's the thing. And I think persistence is like the key thing. If you know you have a product people want and it works, everything else can be solved, but you have to persist. You can't give up.
Right. Gotcha. And kind of leaving off with a few, maybe some lessons learned that you could share with some entrepreneurs. Like, what were the pivotal breakthrough or turning points for X, and what sort of lessons did you learn that are, you would want to impart to other founders that are trying to scale and
Wow.
grow missions like this or systems like this?
So our tech was built for the oil and gas industry. That's hands down. It was built for water that comes up with oil and gas. So we spent a lot of time and wasted a bunch of money trying to get those guys to buy our product, because that's who it was built for. It would have been a lot easier to say, well, it's not as dramatic and the savings aren't, this huge savings, but it's still a cool product, and gone straight into dealing with landfills. If we'd done any of that, instead of focusing on the market that we first identified, that scientists, the inventors identified, if we had not focused so much, they always talk about focus, right? Oh, you got to focus. We focused too long on those guys. And it turns out the oil and gas industry is almost worse than the stock market. It's very emotional. And it's because they do one thing really well, and they control the means of production, but they do not control the price. The price is constantly moving around. And so the only way that they can minimize risk is by doing everything the same way over and over and over again, right? That's how you minimize risk in oil and gas. So innovation is very difficult to introduce into that market space. Whereas if I go to the chemical manufacturer, it's like, well, I had 3 other guys bet on it, but other stuff worked. Will your stuff work? Boom. Decision
Hmm.
made.
Hmm.
We were talking to Chevron in the early days, and they said, when your machines are in a catalog, that's when we'll buy them. None of
Hmm.
this, we're going to build your machine and deliver it to you
Right.
over the weekend.
Custom
We
build.
only buy stuff that's like, the term space ready tech is so funny because it means old technology. I mean, that's the only
Right.
reason, with the exception of some innovations that SpaceX and some of the other companies have done. The only way you get somebody into space is it's been proven on Earth so much that you feel safe that it's not going to fail in space. Right. That's oil and gas industry. Whereas everybody else is trying to innovate all around because they can. The oil and gas industry can't get out of its way sometimes to introduce innovation because of the risk profile.
Right.
And it's
Right.
because they don't control the price.
Right. Gotcha. So maybe a lesson there is that you maybe don't hold on for too long.
A little bit too much
Something costs both.
persistence there, Uncle Grizz. He was successful, but it could have been so much more successful if we'd said, we're really just going to focus on architects or, something like that. So that the focus is required, but you got to be able to sort of, even after all this time, I was myopic about focusing on trying to solve a problem that was right in front of everybody's face. Everybody knew it was a great solution. Everybody knew it saved money, and it didn't matter.
Right. No, exactly. So know when to cut your losses and know when to focus your energies elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I gotcha. Where do you see X Water 12 months from now?
Well, 12 months from now, just selling machines, building machines, the turning of the wrench stuff. We're going to get into the ball in the box phase. And so in order for me to stay involved in the company, we're looking at other kinds of tech that will be interesting, because my job, besides running the company, my job is, the next thing. And so I'm looking forward to looking at the next thing. We're looking at a cool bioreactor that might work for farm runoff. We're looking at a couple things for reducing or concentrating salt, to expand our portfolio. But all of this is designed to get the company in shape to be sold.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm not an IPO guy, right? I don't want those hundreds of employees. Deb, my sister and I have this deal that when we need an HR person, we're out. It's too big. And when it gets that big, it's a different kind of management style. It's not something we're good at. And admitting that to investors, I think, is pretty important. So we're already looking to be acquired 3 years from now. We're already talking to companies about being acquired 3 years from now. Once we build a book of business up and we've got the recurring revenue, we've got those happy customers, then our valuation will be extreme. And that valuation, by the way, let's say we went on for 3 years and we sold the company and the founders got out. Okay, great. We made some money. And we get to go do something else. Job well done. Congratulations all around. Or 3 years from now, I could go raise $100 million and build a manufacturing plant in Malaysia. And then retire 10 years after that. And probably not make any more money than I would at getting out in 3 years. Because we'd be diluted all to hell to raise $100 million. So that sweet spot is something that we're looking for. We know where it is. We know where we're going to be like, all right, that's enough. Valuation's where we want it. Sell the company, move on.
Gotcha. I mean, I do have to ask, like, how do you manage founder, like the focus between sales, innovation, operations, podcasts, and what else? How are you balancing that?
Well, I'm not married. I have no kids that I'm aware of. I have a schnauzer, and I really love what I do, and I work constantly. I've always been this way, and my mom had that kind of work ethic. Like, if you can do less, don't. Right? If you've got so much time, then go learn French, right? Stay busy. Besides 9water, which is sort of 10 or 12 hours a day, I'm still reading, a couple books a week, reading every newspaper that's credible every morning. I love my life. I love being able to do all these cool things at one time.
And it's actually a good way to, kind of leave this on a really good note, because social entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, let's say.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Yeah, if you want to be somebody that makes a positive impact on society, you've got to be willing to put in the work.
Final advice for social entrepreneurs trying to get into any of these problem-solving areas that we need to do. Hard work, number one. What else? Resilience, maybe. Persistence.
Resilience and persistence, both, right? And knowing what you're not good at. And it took me a couple of companies to figure that out. My 30s and even 40s, I did not know what I wasn't good at. And usually it boiled down to I didn't want to do it. Like, if you ask somebody, well, I'm not really good at bookkeeping, it's because you don't want to do it, because people that are good at bookkeeping love it for some reason. So, figure out what you're really good at it, capitalize on that, hire or beg, borrow, and steal the other talent you need, and go and just keep pushing.
Definitely. It was a great conversation to hear about all the hard work and the innovation that you've been doing at Xwater. It's very fascinating. It takes a lot to actually understand what you're actually doing.
We continually are trying to communicate what the hell we're doing, and some of our investors are like, "What? I didn't know you did that." So it's because it's got so many. It's so far-reaching. It's monumental. I appreciate the time with you today, and it's always nice talking about the company. I could do this for hours, but I probably should get back to work. Yeah.
I hear you. I can hear that call as well. But why don't you tell us one last time, Xwater, or why is it important? Why does it matter?
I think Xwater matters because we've sort of figured out how to take a technology, put it into something that's actually easy to use and affordable and helps people save or make money, and it has a huge impact. And that's pretty cool. But we want to be normal and boring. In the future, we want people to be like, well, yeah, there's the water machine over there. It's just, making clean water, and we don't think about it. That's the compliment. That's the cool thing.
Gotcha. So, John, Grizz, where can we find you? Instagram, LinkedIn?
Yeah, look up Xwater. And actually, the X is named after a planet in Dune. It has nothing to do with the ion exchange, although we do some ion exchange. So all the cool technology came from X. And when we were starting the company, I thought, that's a pretty cool name, X. So xwater.com, and then also in Start Engine, startengine.com/ix-water. And that's us.
Awesome, Grizz. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Connie.
That was John Grizz Deal, founder of Water, a company using advanced technology to help industries cut their water costs by up to 90% while reducing their environmental impact. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who's passionate about water innovation, climate tech, or building mission-driven businesses that make a real difference. Again, you can learn more about Water at xwater.com and connect with Grizz on LinkedIn to follow his journey. As always, So Good to Grow Good is about scaling solutions that matter, and every story we share helps plant another seed of change. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep sowing good to grow good.